the taboo around psychology and mental health. And we didn't talk about that. It was not something that people were technically comfortable with even talking about. I think the key for us, not knowing it, was to how do we square the circle on these connections? How do we piece these things together that are part of who we are?
I have a strange relationship with food. I've always been very conscious of that. I don't want to impose my craziness on my own daughter. Hi, I'm Stacey Jackson.
And I'm Roy Bassnett.
Join us for the Gen-X-Perience podcast every other week.
So if you were born between 1965 and 1980, that makes you a Gen Xer. And that being the case, that makes this podcast for you.
We are interviewing the most amazing people from all over the world in all walks of life, discussing culture, music, and politics.
The range is incredible. You're going to get to hear some wonderful stories.
So join us every other week for the Gen-X-Perience podcast. I'm Stacey Jackson.
And I'm Roy Bassnett. Hello and welcome to the Gen-X-Perience podcast with myself, Roy Bassnett, and the lovely
Stacey Jackson.
For benefit people who may not have seen or heard this podcast before, how would you describe it? I'll let you do the intro on this one then.
Okay. It basically is a podcast where we interview various people who have grown up, I guess, in the 80s and early part of the 90s, who are, I guess, what we call the Generation X. They come from all walks of life. Some are in the music industry, some are in the television industry, some are fashion industry stylists and psychologists, basically discussing various themes of how the 80s or growing up in that era influenced them to become who they are today, and what from the 80s that they've taken to inspire them to, I guess, on their journey of life. So today, not only is she a really, really good friend of mine, but we both grew up in Canada, in Montreal as kids. She's a little bit younger than me. So we weren't in the same year at school, but we both live in London and we became really good friends. Our kids are friends. And she is a renowned psychologist. She's a talking head on a lot of different television talk shows and podcasts and radio shows. Her expertise is in body image and changing life, repotting yourself, and the things that happen while your life changes, on your journey through life. And so I wanted to have her on the show because obviously growing up in the 80s and you're having different cultural, as a teenager, you want to sort of conform everybody. Like you told me the story about how you wanted to have a perm and you wanted to have streaks in your hair and you wore your hair a certain way. And
I had them.
Yes, you did. And at that point, you also had hair. But anyway, and so now as Gen Xers, how do we view ourselves and our bodies, and also with women going through menopause and men who go through menopause. And there are just different things about also how, having long careers and dealing with change. And when you get to a certain age, what happens, how do you make big life decisions? I think having her on the show is going to be very inspiring. So I wanted to introduce the gorgeous and brilliant Holly Rubin.
Oh,
did I do a good job?
Great introduction. Thank you so much, Stacey. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. And this is Roy. And of course, she can see, but some of the listeners don't know. But Roy did used to have hair, and he did have it in a perm back in the 80s.
I'm glad we've got a psychologist on here. I mean, when Stacey is kind of like demeaning me on my lack of hair, what is she really saying? That's what I want to know, Holly.
What am I really saying? Well, you know what? I think he's super cute, even without hair. And, Kojak really was a style back then.
Playing the Kojak card now as well. Huh?
Anyways, on that note, we went through a lot, Halls, in the 80s, especially with fitness, the introduction of like Jane Fonda and all that back in the day. And there were all these supermodels that were coming out in the 80s. And so as a teenager growing up, we were very much influenced. And of course, all the bands that we discussed who, through the launch of MTV now had the way to express themselves visually. And so we were, as teenagers, very conforming to like what was on trend at the time. Not very dissimilar to teenagers now, but back in the 80s, the changes were very distinctive. and, how we felt about our bodies because what was being shown on MTV or in these fashion magazines, or we went through a lot of different relationships with fitness and with eating and everything. So I think Holly's being here is going to be very helpful to a lot of people who are now going through different changes coming from Generation X, and now we're older. And so I want to know from you, my love, Holly, how did the 80s influence our perceptions of beauty and body image? So, what was the most unrealistic trend from that time? For me, it was probably big hair. But there was a lot of stuff in the 80s that you can talk about.
I think big hair is a great place to start because everything was big. Everything was big. Everything was colorful. Everything was neon and loose. I'm thinking about all those tops that we would wear off the shoulder that we would have to cut the necks out of, right? So that we could have that look. And it was about big and it was about bold. And it was the first time really we were interacting with fitness in a different way and step classes and aerobic and this emphasis on, Jane Fonda was in our living rooms, wasn't she? What we were watching our moms or our aunts get really into that fitness piece as well and leg warmers. And it had a very big influence on taking charge of our bodies on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the fashion piece was so coordinated with that as well. And I think that really had an impact on how we viewed women and how we viewed ourselves in that time.
I got to ask you, Holly, because these days, psychologists, it's almost, you get like pop star status if you're a psychologist now. Maybe that's something to do with programs like Lie to Me or something like that. It's a massive thing now. You see so many big organizations will employ the use of a psychologist, certainly in Wall Street and things like that. When you first started your journey as a psychologist, where were you? What did you want to be?
It's a good question. And it's really funny to hear you say that there's star status now, because that was the last thing that people in psychology were doing it for, first of all. And also the taboo around psychology and mental health. And we didn't talk about that. And we certainly culturally, so where Stacey and I come from, maybe a little bit more, but certainly not in Britain. And we were not something that people were technically comfortable with even talking about. Now, the surge in mental health, we have had a whole awakening around that. But that wasn't the case then. Myself, I was always, funny enough, I was very much interested in fashion in my earlier days, but also in psychology. And having a lot of different interests, like I know Stacey has as well. I think the key for us, not knowing it, was how do we square the circle on these connections? How do we piece these things together that are part of who we are, but that they don't really necessarily fit together in the way society sees them. So I did my undergrad in psychology at McGill, and then I went and I did a fashion buying and merchandising degree. And then I went into fashion, and people sort of would ask me, I don't get it. How did these two bits come together? And I said, there is so much psychology in fashion and in the fashion industry. We just weren't necessarily putting those things together. And then along with that comes the body image piece. I loved the idea of putting items together and creating outfits and putting things that might not necessarily go together. So that creative element of it. But I was also really aware of using the body as a canvas too. And how do we get dressed and what does that say about us? And where's our identity come into play there? So after I did that stint in the fashion industry, which I love fashion, but the industry absolutely was not for me. And I went back and I did a master's in social work and really explored and researched the body image piece. So the internal, how we feel about how we look, how we put ourselves together externally, and then how we feel about that. And there's always been this very interesting disconnect. Whereas we might come off one way, we might put ourselves together one way, people might expect us to be a certain way because of first impressions, but that's not necessarily how many people feel on the inside. That sort of became a lifelong passion for me.
That makes perfect sense, especially coming from the 80s. Like, I'm wondering if growing up in that era where it was not polluted, but mental health wasn't a thing, and body image and relationships with food became a thing because fitness was a growing industry. All these supermodels were, on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So I'm wondering, as a Gen Xer, do you find people that you have, like clients, for example, their relationships with their own body image would go into their relationships with their own children and their body image? Like, I try so hard not like to separate what I'm feeling about, let's say, an outfit when my daughter wears an outfit. Like, I wouldn't have ever worn some things that she would want to wear. But then I look back at my time when I was a teenager and I would be dressing away, I guess my parents wouldn't want me to be dressing, So, but I try so hard deliberately not to put my onus on her. Like, I have a strange relationship with food. As you know, I don't like eating junky food. I eat really healthily. I'm really disciplined, and I could eat a cookie if I even eat a cookie at all. Whereas,
so are you saying, so we can play catch up on with this, when you listen to your daughter, are you kind of, maybe you're not even thinking about it, are you kind of imposing a few kind of Stacey-isms onto?
I hope not, because I have shitty relationship with food, know, and I don't want my daughter to like get my bad habits. And I don't say that they're bad. I think
when you say shitty relationship with food, you mean you don't want to put weight on? Is that what you?
I'm very vertically challenged. So for me, a couple of kilos is a dress size, like percentage wise, right?
Okay.
And my daughter is also petite. I've always been very conscious of that, and I don't want to impose my craziness on my own daughter, so I'm very conscious.
Got it. Well, let's get the doctor in on this one here then. Holly, what can you do for this woman?
Well, for this woman, I'm super pleased to hear that she is very aware of that. So, Stace, the fact that you know that and the fact that you're aware of not wanting to do that is incredibly healthy and wonderful. So, points for that.
Like, she can see it from my eyes when, like, she's taking a couple of cookies. I'm sure she's like imagining, my mother's probably not going to like this, because she knows how I feel, I don't really care. She has to feel comfortable in her own body.
I feel as though, like, I'm adopting the persona of a psychologist here. I'm thinking, when you're doing that, when you're saying, oh, don't be taking those cookies there, are you thinking this from a point of view of it's not healthy for you and therefore, you could shorten your life because you're eating rubbishy foods? Or are you thinking of it, I don't want you to look fat? What's the...
I think a little bit is a bit of jealousy. Like, she can just take a cookie and like, I would never do it. Why? Like,
you can do it when you're younger. You can do it. Yeah,
I guess, but like, I'm a little bit more cautious, and I'm like, okay, how many jumping jacks do I have to do to burn off that fucking cookie? So there's that. And then, I just want her to be aware, but I want her to be conscious of it because it's coming from her, not because she thinks that her mother thinks that she shouldn't have the cookie, And so there's a little bit of guilt involved in that as well. So I don't know. Maybe you're right, Holly. I should make an appointment with you.
We're all human, right? And the very fact that you're wanting her to develop her own relationship is really good, because there's no question, there's lots of research that shows that girls pick up on what their mothers do, on what their mothers say, right? So the fact that you're aware of that is great. And you guys are very open and have those conversations.
Of course. And we're very close.
Holly, can I ask you what a typical day in the office looks like for you? What would be a standard kind of conversation that you would have people? And I know there's obviously, client confidentiality that's involved in it. So I'm certainly not going to ask you what your individual clients, what does a typical day in the office look like for you? What are the standard kind of, if you like, issues that people have?
If we're staying on the theme of body image, the interesting thing is people come in and they might say that their presenting problem is, I don't know, they're feeling anxious or they're feeling depressed over something. The more questions that I can get in an assessment, so that's the first time we meet, I'll go through a series of questions. Often there is a lot that lies under a discontent around how they physically feel about how they look. Now, not everybody, of course, But that body image lens is one that I operate through quite a bit. And it's through this idea that what are we not feeling good about? What's coming up now? And it can be so many different things. But as we've mentioned in the past, these transitional times for women tend to include physical changes as well as emotional changes. And
men too.
Yes, men too. Absolutely. And I was going to say you were taking the myth before out of baldness, but that's something that men come in for often. So it's not just women when we're talking about body image. We're talking about how men also feel about their physical selves.
Sorry to interrupt there, Holly. When you're saying about men that come in who are of my kind of follicle look, as it were, are we talking that they're concerned about it? Because truth of the matter is, I probably started going bald in the latter part of my 20s. And it's never really I can't turn around and say I was traumatized by it at any point, to be honest with you. Are you telling me that the people who come to see you are having a real difficulty accepting that?
Yeah. So they would come in and would have difficulty, or they can come in specifically and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with this. I'm losing my hair. None of my friends around me. I'm in my 20s and it's difficult. Now, potentially, again, this is a generational change, right? We might not have seen this, as you're saying, in your age, where at your stage, you might not have talked about that. You might not have, as you're saying, you didn't feel it. It didn't impact you. And that's fantastic if that were the case. But many people do get impacted by that. So part of what's happening today is we are normalizing that a little bit more, that if somebody does feel uncomfortable, it's great to be able to address that, talk about it, and then decide what to do going forward.
So what do you think the biggest mental shift, like Generation X women and men are going through as we age? Because mental health now has become such a prevalent, and I suspect it's also from Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, and there's just more and more information about that, right? So what is the biggest shift that we're going through in terms of how, our generation is aging mentally?
It's interesting you say mentally, but at the same time, there's such a connection between our mental and our physical selves, right? So I'm thinking the fact is that we're talking about it more. I think there's always been angst around aging. There always been, especially for women, right? This idea of getting older, what that means for us, a nest emptying. Who am I if identity shift? Who am I if I'm not a mother now that my kids aren't around, for those of us that are married with children or divorced with children? What happens to me? And that's a huge question. So that identity shift, say, comes along as well with the physical changes and the fact that we're talking about that a little bit more. We're reading so much around longevity. Longevity wasn't a word that would come into play, in, 3-4 years ago even. The focus on how are we going to stay healthy? How are we going to stay well? What does that mean today differently than it did? And I know North Americans tend to have more of a proactive approach towards health and healthcare, but we're seeing that more and more in the UK. I'm here 24 years, and that has shifted a lot here. We're taking more of an active approach to aging well, working out physically, knowing that we have, exercise has to change depending on where we are in our ages and stages. It's just more accepted. It's more talked about. And I think that's freeing. Any women and men. Okay,
I have a quick question. So you remember the Golden Girls? That's what we were watching when we were in the 80s, right? So the Golden Girls were our age.
They weren't actually, but okay. You look at them and you think, well, they looked a lot older,
right?
Yeah.
So what has changed, Halls? What's going on now that us Gen Xers are not looking like the grandmas?
That's a good question.
Of that era. Why are we the same age as the Golden Girls, and yet, I don't look like
I'm not sure.
B. Arthur.
I've never put myself in the category of a Golden Girl, by the way. But anyway, I'll let you answer the question, Holly, if you would, because it's an interesting one.
The fact that you're being put in the category as Golden Girl.
You're my Golden Girl, babe.
Oh, well, thank you very much. But it is a good point, that people seem to, when you look at somebody who was in the 40s years ago, they look like they were in the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Whereas they don't seem to look like that anymore.
Botox.
No, because the 50s are, 40s are the new 50s and 50s are the new 60s. And I think that the truth of the matter is we don't want to look like that anymore, do we? We want to be able to sustain a youthful look, whatever that means for each person. It's going to be individual, but people are not wanting to sort of give in to this idea of quote unquote aging. Why do we need to? Why do we need to reflect what the Golden Girls did physically? Now, they were sharp, weren't they? And they were certainly funny and the humor was fantastic, but they didn't necessarily, I don't know, nobody wants to really look like that. They don't. We look around and we see what people are dressing like and what's street culture, and we kind of want to continue to be visible, to be seen, and we don't have to sort of put on a big loose jumper and cower away. Without
wishing to cause a rift in your relationship with Stacey, if you had to label her one of the Golden Girls, which one would it be?
That's such a good
Betty White. She was the flaky one, wasn't she?
You are not flaky, my dear,
no.
But no.
Go on, who are you saying? Go on.
I don't know. Oh my God, it's such a good question.
I think the mother.
The mother. The bubby.
She was the grandma. She was the one that went out with, was it Burt Reynolds? Do you remember that episode? When he comes to the house, they're like, who are you? What? Like, it's Burt Reynolds. Do you remember that episode?
I don't know. Do you know what? I'll tell you, and I used to love the Golden Girls. I thought the Golden Girls was fantastic. Brilliant. I couldn't remember any episodes of it whatsoever. And I speak as a person I don't like rom-coms and things like that. But I used to love the Golden Girls. I mean, all of that kind of stuff. I think that, because there used to always be this conversation, American comedy and British comedy are very different, but the Golden Girls was brilliant of the time as
Iconic.
Well. The likes of, I know he's disgraced now, Bill Cosby. His show was very funny.
Yes.
But we won't go down too much of that route.
For sure.
And latterly, the likes of Frasier and things like that. So the comedy started to transfer over there in that situation, and it was brilliant. But just to come back to the question I wanted to put to you, when you were talking about that people are concerned about the way they look these days, and perhaps maybe in some cases overly concerned, because I see a lot of, I could understand it. If you're a person of a certain age and you want that aging process to slow down a little bit, you may be tempted to go and get some surgery done or something like that, or what have you. But you're getting young people now replacing their teeth, replacing their hair. What is the reason behind that? What's the driving reason? Is it that it's vanity, pure and simple, or is there an insecurity there? Because
they also see their mothers looking like blowfish. I mean, have you seen some of those women with the lips that are like...
Yeah, and that is ridiculous. But I mean, are we talking, if I can get it from the psychologist's point of view, as it were, are we talking about deep insecurities or vanity, or is there a crossover between the two?
It's really hard to know when the societal messaging is that anyone can just go in and have, be it Botox or, just the little simple procedures. We're looking at bigger, more complex surgeries. If it's so normalized and everyone is doing it, it's really, people jump on that bandwagon, don't they? So some of it might be vanity. Some of it is just trying to keep up with what's going on in a friendship group, whatnot. The other bit, though, is that the belief that however they feel about themselves can be rectified by a procedure. Now, that's just not the case, and it depends how ingrained these are. There are people, everybody has insecurities. And if there's one thing potentially that makes somebody feel uncomfortable about themselves, let's say they're in my office and we can talk that through. If it's something that's been with them, a nose, for example, that they really have a hard time with, if they don't like their nose and they want to fix that, my belief is that by talking about that, understanding where that comes from, and if at the end of the day, it's a physical aspect of yourself that you just don't like, and it's going to have a huge impact on your overall confidence levels and your overall self-esteem, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing any of those kinds of procedures, as long as the person is aware, as long as it's conscious, and as long as it's very specific to one thing. The worry in this whole world at the moment, and it's been like this for over a decade, that if we are fixing internal problems and internal issues externally, those are never going to change. And that's where it's problematic. And that's where I really have there's real
an issue
work.
with. Yeah, for sure. Oh, no, for sure. I mean, it leads me to this question. Like, so how do Generation X men and women maintain their confidence through all their transitions now? Like other things like menopause, career changes, empty nesting, all that stuff. How do they maintain their confidence? I mean, forget the physical. Let's go back a bit to the mental health aspect of it. Like, how do they, because there's such big things that are happening in our lives.
Well, I would suggest avoid doing a podcast with Stacey Jackson, who keeps mentioning that I'm bald. Maybe that might be a good call, to be honest with you. But yeah, no, it's a good
I'm bringing him a wig next time. And also, what piece of advice would you give to anyone struggling specifically with with their own body image today? So I just gave you 2 questions, but you can intertwine them, I guess.
Today, again, the focus is physical, physical, physical. I think what we need to do as we start to get older, our bodies are they're not functioning the same way. Our fatigue levels are different. We're just not the same. And bodies are meant to change. I think if there's any message from today, it's the fact that we are supposed to change as we get older. That comes with so many benefits as well.
But we're fighting it. We're fighting it, Holly, every moment of the day.
Exactly. We're fighting it. And the more we fight it, the more difficult the journey is. So part of this, as we've talked about, for lots of different things, it's about acceptance, right? It's not easy to do. It's very challenging. But if we can begin to also see our bodies in terms of function over form also, and noticing the positive things that our bodies do for us every single day, from putting our feet on the floor when we get out of bed to, washing up and taking a shower, being able to be in our bodies and go through our days. I know it sounds really cliche and simplistic, but noticing that and being able-bodied is a real privilege too. And we have to, focus on those things as well. And then the small, minute changes kind of pale in comparison to those bits. So I'm not saying we have to love, but also let's be realistic, right? It's not easy to endure those changes, and nobody likes it. It also shows us wrinkles on our face, shows a life well lived, and shows experience and a little bit more love handles. No, we don't necessarily.
I must be a very experienced person. Right, listen, I'll tell you what I've got to add. Listen, I love when we do these conversations, we get to speak to people who've got such expertise, and I can listen and have conversations about it. I just want to move it in another direction at the moment, because am I right in assuming, Stacey, that the lovely Holly is from your manor, we would call it manor, your hood?
My
is
hood.
She one of your homies?
She's one of my homies.
Right, okay. Then that being the case, right, how long have you known each other?
About 25 years.
25.
But
more.
We went to the same hairdresser.
Okay.
But our mothers know each other, but I'm a little older than she is. So we weren't in the same.
Here we go. Here's the question I want to put to you. Same as what I did with other guests we've had before. So we're talking mid-1980s, something like that. And I bump into you, Holly, on the streets. What are you looking like? And what music would you be listening to on your Sony Walkman if I did bump into you?
1986.
80-ish. You can pick whatever
89.
period of the 80s. It's up to you. Go on.
Oh my God. I definitely have big hair. Very big, curly. I actually did big hair today just so that, so I could be in character. Leggings, a big sweatshirt with matching socks, potentially leg warmers if I was going to dance class after. And on my yellow Sony Walkman, I'd be listening to so many things. Stacey, you give not as rocky, I would say, as Stacey, but I listened to a lot of things. I loved female artists. I love, I wasn't as rock driven, I would say, but I love lots of different genres.
Madonna.
Well, I gave you a little bit of sympathy because I was actually looking at this before. I've been pulling my phone up here, actually, trying to work out exactly in terms of music what Canada has actually given to the world. So let's go through some of these. Bryan Adams, give you that, and you know Bryan, of course. Celine Dion is in there, but then it kind of moves into, it goes downhill pretty quickly after this. When Miguel Brown, I remember him, he was a high energy kind of disco stuff in the 1980s. Very good indeed. This is 80s stuff that I'm looking at. I mean, it's picked up a little bit now because Bieber saved you, basically. Canada it was finished until Bieber came along, really.
No, I don't know if he's a great example.
But yeah, I mean, all right, then, well, let's move it on because, I mean, obviously, the thing about Gen X people is that they have a tendency, we can talk about the past, we can talk about the 80s, but they're still into music now. So that being the case, if we were to pick up your phone and had a look at the last song that played on your phone, what would we find, Holly?
When? In the 80s, you mean?
No,
today.
Now, today. What's on there now? What are you listening to now?
I'm listening to like so much of what's in my house based on my teenagers, but these are such bad questions for me. I'm not. These are not good questions.
I can answer for you. Probably a show tune.
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. Show tune. As in like a big musical.
Yes.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Hamilton.
Oh, she's into it there. She's really into it. Yeah.
And old show tunes too, like Cabaret and Chicago and like that sort of stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm on that note, now that we're we've got this little quiz.
Okay.
I'm going to read 2 questions and very random, picking them out of a card box.
I know you're going to get mine. I know
Okay.
she's going to get mine.
Okay, hold on. I didn't even look at mine yet. Okay, Halls, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the easy one to start off with, then, Holly. And it's going to be this one. 1987 is where we're going. Which 1987 film does Michael Douglas play Gordon Gekko?
Oh, you so know this.
I don't.
You know this.
Think of a certain part of New York where, shall we say, there's a lot of money there.
Wall Street?
Yes.
Hey, I helped her with that one.
Thank
I
you.
helped her with
That was a very good clue.
I like
Okay, you're going to get both of my questions. Okay, you ready?
I thought that.
We
I
actually
thought-
just talked about this with one of our guests previously. Which previously famous Hollywood star became the president of the United States in 1981?
Right, yeah.
That's it.
Well, that was
Ronald Reagan.
That was a good clue.
Which Oscar-winning film sees Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman star as brothers?
Rain Man.
Yes.
There
That's
you
great.
are.
And you're going to get this one
You pulled it
100%.
back.
You're going to totally get this one. Okay, you ready? Which American artist has the biggest selling album of the 1980s?
Michael.
Oh, right. Okay.
Michael Jackson. Yeah.
Ah, well,
But I would have thought it would have been Madonna too.
Because remember, Thriller was one of the biggest selling albums, and so that made him.
Yeah.
I think it still is one of. I think it still is the biggest selling album of all time. In fact,
But I can tell you what he was wearing. I can tell you the red and black leather jacket with the
and his one glove.
and his one glove with his shoulder pads, which were very 80.
By the way, I knew a lot of people who actually like wore a one glove.
I know.
Like,
well, because they lost the other one, you mean?
no, because they just want to be like Michael Jackson, the influence of fashion.
Ah,
Exactly.
Right, okay. We're about to wrap. What was Michael Jackson psychologically trying to get across by just wearing one glove?
Ooh, that's such a good question. That he was so good he didn't need to.
Or he was playing golf.
Or he was playing golf. That's right.
Yeah.
Or apparently he did have some sort of skin, a skin disease, you know, where like his skin started to fade. Yes. And his skin was fading. And so I think that was what was happening on his hand first. And so he put the glove on to cover the fact that his skin was changing. I think that's really the reason. But anyways, I like your reason better, Halls.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to wrap this up.
We've got to wrap now. I've got to say, Holly, it's been a real pleasure for you. I mean, your expertise is unparalleled.
I love you to bits.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show. You're hilarious and you're so wonderful. I just absolutely loved hearing you speak.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and you. Another one of your amazing guests there. I appreciate that, which is wonderful. And, it's easy for me to go down the rabbit hole and start asking questions in psychology because I always find that subject
I do too. I can sit and talk to her forever. I love going. We go every once in a while. We'll do power walk.
She got one of those like leather couches and she goes, tell me about your childhood. All that kind of, she do all that.
She probably does. Yeah. No, she's just very well versed. She speaks very eloquently, and also she really knows her shit. Like she just, it's great. And
that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it is.
And that concludes another episode of the Gen-X-Perience. Hopefully, come and join us again. Do please like and subscribe and all of the usual kind of stuff that makes it possible for us to continue doing this kind of thing. So, on behalf of myself, Roy Bastner, goodbye, and
from Stacey Jackson, see you again soon.
Bye. Thanks very much for checking out the Gen-X-Perience podcast. Please do like and subscribe. We look forward to your comments. And if you could give us a 5-star review, that would be really appreciated.